All right, guys, welcome back to Middle American Outdoors Fireside Chat. This is week 11 of the chats, and we have Matthew Reaves again from Southern Pursuit. We're going to continue our discussion on self-filming and basically an intro to self-filming. If you guys were participating or if you want to go back and listen, back in mid-October, I want to say like episode 5 or 6, somewhere in there, we had Matthew on the first time, and we kind of just went into what it's like getting into self-filming. And today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into probably the most common question, which is, what do I need to get started? We're going to go into some gear talk. We realize it's kind of a less than ideal platform because you're not going to be able to see pictures on the podcast or anything like that, but we'll use some names and you can look up some items and just get some general ideas. For those guys on the live as well, thank you for joining us. I'll be watching the comments back here, both on the Facebook and the YouTube channels. If you guys notice any technical difficulties, we lose audio, anything like that, somebody chime in right away so we can recover from where we were. And yeah, let's just go ahead and dive into it. So, welcome back, Matthew.
Glad to be on tonight and look forward to talking about this topic.
Good. How is it? How's the hunting season going for you?
Oh, it's going good. I started off good. Had a good early season, and then gun season came in and kind of slowed everything down for me. But I still got deer on camera that I'm trying to hunt. Really going to dive in this week and this weekend. This is our coldest weather we've had down here. I think it's going to be getting in the 20s, highs in the 40s. So that's unusual for us here. I actually had some snow on the ground right now, so looking forward to getting out there this weekend.
Nice. How long is your gun season? I thought I saw today that it's like absurdly long.
So it goes from, I think it opened November 20, whatever last weekend was, November something, in the 25th or something, and it goes till February 10th.
Jeez.
Yeah,
So there's no like surviving the Orange Army and then moving on. Like once it starts there, you have to deal with it the whole rest of the year.
Right. Now I'm fortunate to have some private land I can hunt, but then a lot of our public land, our WMAs, are bow hunt only, except for like certain weekends. So like one of the WMAs I hunt, it has 3 gun hunt weekends, and everything else is bow hunt only. So I kind of focus on those areas just to avoid the crowds.
Yeah. And you still got to deal with a deer are still going to be skittish because they don't stay on.
Yeah.
Jake and I talked about this last week that even though he's got private access, it's a little, they're little sections and they're surrounded by walk-in hunting in Kansas, and those deer don't live on his little quarter, so they're still getting educated on the public, and even though he's getting a chance at them on his quarter, they're still educated and skittish and starting to change their patterning big time.
Sure.
That's crazy, man. Is it rifle, or do you guys have rifle, or do you only have like slug or shotgun like Iowa or?
You have the first, like the week before the gun opener, it will be muzzleloader, and then from there on out, it's full blown rifle. So it's, which granted our rut, you can hunt the rut all year in Alabama with how our deer population is. So, but for the most of it, it's concentrated like the end of December to mid-February.
For rut?
Yeah.
That's so crazy how different. We've got once rut kicks on, I guess, early November, it can kind of trickle on through January, etc. But, real peak rut is going to be that first week or two of November, basically. And then it really starts to shut down.
People talk about chasing it here. It's, you can start right on the Georgia line, and you follow Wildlife Refuge and all those areas. They'll start rutting, mid-October, and go from there. We actually moved our seasons this year. They typically start on October 15th, but we have 2 different zones, a D and an E zone, and they opened up the 1st of October this year. So they're just trying to figure some different things out here in Alabama.
It's crazy how different it is. Just state to state.
Yeah.
Even here with the 3 of us, with Jake in Kansas, me in Nebraska, and Ben in Iowa, they're just wildly different. I think Jake's rifle season starts this week, I think. I don't know. I don't think they had a muzzleloader season before. I think their muzzleloaders later in December. But it's weird between Kansas and Iowa. So my brother lives just south, or Kansas and Nebraska. He lives just south of the Nebraska border. And that tag that I was telling you I draw for the mule deer is just north of him on the unit across the Nebraska line. And if you go back and forth on, we have rifle and then they have rifle, and then we start muzzleloader and then they have muzzleloader shortly after. And so these deer just get pushed back and forth across the state line like crazy right in that concentrated area. But it's wild just how different it is. And then in Iowa, they don't have rifle season. Like I don't think they have like whatever you want to call like center fire or something like that. They have to use slug and muzzleloader basically. But then they've got like different early and late gun seasons. It's crazy. It's hard to keep track of. But.
Jumps in and out, yeah.
But anyway, so it's been pretty good. I saw you got a good buck down. You've got 2 bucks down, right?
Yeah, a little one and a decent one.
Yeah, with $2. $2 with a bow.
Right.
On film.
Got them on film, yep.
Yeah, you even got kill shots and everything on film, which is, for those guys that are tuning in to learn about self-filming, that is so much harder than you think it is.
It really is.
Even just to have them not slip the camera frame or...
It took me a year to get a good kill shot on video.
Yeah.
And then when it happens, it's so rewarding though.
Yeah. And both years this year are great. On your main cam and everything, so you could actually do something with it.
Yeah.
Last year I got an antlerless on film with the bow camera, but it was a GoPro, and we'll go into this stuff in more detail, and there wasn't a ton you could do with the footage as far as zooming and quality, but I mean, you could see the animal on camera. At least it just, on a GoPro, looks like it's 60 yards away.
Yeah,
It's a 17-yard shot. It looks like I'm shooting a squirrel. But yeah, and then you guys will see coming out this year. Ben's video just dropped today. I see Ben is on. What's up, dude? He's on just commenting today because we want to focus on what Matthew has to say a little bit more than what we all have to say. And but anyway, Ben's video just dropped today of the real nice 8-point that he killed, just about a month ago in Iowa. And he filmed most of that hunt on his cell phone. He didn't have his main camera with him. And so he got everything but the kill shot, because obviously you can't get that with your cell phone.
I actually watched it right before we jumped on here, so that was good. I mean, it's crazy what you can do with a cell phone. It's just right there on it at all times.
We're definitely going to be covering that with some of the tips today. And then my buck video will be coming out. I'm working my way through the whole season, and I'm guessing it'll be coming out in like a week or two. In the same scenario, I had no camera gear because it was actually raining ice that day. So you're in an ideal scenario to go try to ambush a mature buck. And I have the rain skirt for the camera, but I'm just I was not willing to risk potentially ruining a very expensive main camera.
Definitely not. No.
Yeah, and the wind was blowing. I was up in like a 6-inch diameter. I don't even know trees that well, but I'm gonna guess like it's a weed tree, like a willow or something.
Yeah, probably willow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about 6 inches in diameter, and the wind's blowing 20-25 miles an hour. So I'm just like along for the ride in my saddle, and so I didn't even get out the GoPros to like try to screw into the tree or nothing. I took a few clips with my cell phone here and there when it wasn't pouring ice, and then a little bit of the recovery. But yeah, that's just the way it goes. It's kind of frustrating that you have all this equipment, you put all the time into it, and you don't get the payoff. But it's awesome that you got the payoff twice this year.
Yeah.
But there's tons of time that goes into that for sure.
Yeah.
So jumping into the self-filming tutorial here that we're going through. This is, like, as I said, this is part 2. If you go back and listen to part 1, it was about a month and a half ago. This is like episode 5 or 6, I'm guessing. And at that time, we just talked about kind of what it's like getting into self-filming. And this time we're going to go over that, like we said, the most commonly asked questions that we see on Facebook and that people ask us, as well as, what gear do you recommend for starting out? And we started to touch on it last time, and now we're just going to dive into it a lot deeper. We've got several other episodes planned in the months ahead, such as next time I think we're going to go into more of the computer editing side of it. What is some stuff to look for in the computer that you're going to buy for editing, and where should you invest the money on that kind of side of it, as well as your storage and what software that we're familiar with, etc. But for today, we're going to focus on the gear. We're going to focus on the gear you need basically to film from the tree, as we both primarily, everybody in our group primarily, both of our groups primarily hunt from a tree stand, and maybe just a little bit of spot and stock, but that's not our primary method of hunting. So most of our gear discussion is going to be on that, hunting from the tree stand. For anybody that's on, feel free to leave questions or comments, and I'll pick those up as we're talking. But let's get into it. Let's get some expert advice from Matthew here.
Hey.
So the first part, I guess, just in general, opening statement, what does it take to get started?
A video camera. Some kind of camera. I mean, whether it's your cell phone or just something that you take in the woods to document and tell your story. As we talked previous in the last video I was in, I kind of shared how I got into it. And it was just getting just a regular old camera that my mom had and taking it out in the woods and put camo tape on it. It was one of those silver ones, and that's just how you get started. I mean, for anybody, I wouldn't necessarily say go spend $1,200 on a full setup and you're a self-filmer, because you may not like it, 2 weeks in. It may cost you a big buck, and you may say, hey, I'm done with it. We're part of a group on Facebook, Self-Film Hunters. If you're not a part of it, check it out. I've seen a lot of setups come up for sale this year, because self-filming has become the next big thing for people to do and jump onto, just like saddle hunting. And I'm not here to promote saddle hunting or self-filming necessarily, but if you're interested in it, we'll talk about it, we'll tell you about it, and give you the information you need to learn about it. But just in a long story about that, basically you just need a camera to get started. Figure out if you like it, and then build on top of that. Me and Matt have talked through text. I mean, we text every week pretty much, and talk about how we build our inventory of filming gear, how I've gone from a simple camera to now I have the DLSR, and go in to get a more cinematic view. And like I said, we can jump deeper and deeper into each one of that. But just to start out, just get you a basic video camera, or even a cell phone. A lot of people are going to the cell phone. They actually make lenses for cell phones that you can use. So, I mean, that's just a brief touch on that, Matt. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that.
I mean, he pretty much covered it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. That'll be it for today. No, that's perfect. That's about dead on. And now we'll go through and we'll kind of break it down by categories. And keep in mind, if you guys watch our videos, or if you've watched both of our groups' videos, you will see Matthew is much more talented in the editing and the cinematic projection. Like you mentioned, the DSLR cameras. We'll touch on that in the next category we're going to talk about here with the main cameras. But I guess my main point to start off with is just to recognize, I've been thinking a lot about this. Some of y'all know we're going to be doing a seminar at the Nebraska Deer and Game Expo in January 15th through the 17th in Lincoln, for anybody that's interested. But we will be doing a seminar, and we'll be presenting it every day there, I think up to 4 times maybe. It'll be an hour-long session on intro to self-filming. I guess they wanted some regular old Joes to come talk about it instead of getting some pros in there. But So we're going to go and we're going to do our best, and we'll go into this a little bit more, and we'll show you more of the gear. But one of the points I focus on when I'm talking to people is it's when you're making these purchases, there's a spectrum to consider on what would be best for you. I guess there's several aspects of the spectrum. There's, and we'll refer to this throughout the night, but how long do you intend to really do this for? Are you just getting a taste of it to see if you like it? Are you really committed to it? Are you doing it for, and then the next part of the spectrum is what are you doing it for? Is it to catalog to show your kids down the road? Is it to all the way, are you trying to make productions for sponsors and stuff? So that changes what you need. What's your budget? That's a huge one in it, obviously. And what's your skill level, your understanding, what's your willingness to be invested into learning? Like my skill level is low, but my willingness to be invested is high. And I would say my aptitude to learn is okay. So I know that I can learn it, and taking on some bigger tasks on it. But all of these things come into play. So when somebody says, what's the perfect one to start with, there's absolutely no way to answer that for every single person in a blanket statement. So keep those things in mind, basically boiling down to what's your purpose for it, how long do you actually intend to do it, and what's your budget when you're trying to make these decisions. And you'll learn that I personally am more of a buy nice or buy twice kind of philosophy. So maybe lean a little bit more towards stretching the budget versus knowing that I'm just going to end up buying again later. But there's a very smart way to go about buying again later, which I think both Matthew and I have done. That you're buying something and then you repurpose that thing later and you just add to it. You're not necessarily just upgrading and wasting. But keep that in mind. That's how we're going to draw back to this. So the first category, I think we'll just start with the main camera. What would you say? Well, let's start. We're going to try to cover what we use now, what we have used, and then what we kind of recommend for that person that's looking to really start from scratch. So what do you use, or what have you used, Matthew?
So, like I said, I started out with just the old handy cam that my mom had that she videoed Christmas, kids opening presents. But I'd say I was in college and I said I wanted to get a good video camera. You always go to Best Buy and you look at them and kind of get a hands-on feel of it. So I did some research, and all my main equipment that I use is Canon. And the camera I use is a Canon G20. It's their G series. They've got a lot more cameras now coming through their G series, all the way just from 1080 to 4K. Mine's actually on the lower end. It's an HD footage, but I do look to upgrade. But my only complaint on it was the zoom. It was a 10 power zoom instead of a 20. So gun hunts, it's a little more difficult. But that's the camera I have. I've seen people use the Sonys, the AX53s. Heard they're really good, but the Canons were just very user-friendly for me with their functions and how they recorded, with their SD card storage, their in-house storage already. It was just very user-friendly for me. I could understand the product and go with that. So they've basically based all their models off of their G10, G20, G30, G40, and it keeps going up. So, the price range for that camera, I found mine for around $600. And it did come with some accessories. So you can find those on eBay or just Best Buy, if you want to buy them new. But I risked it and bought a used camera. But I didn't buy a camera that I was iffy about. And with me saying that, it wasn't like, is this going to shoot good? Is this going to have good image stabilization? So I didn't break the bank on this one, knowing that if I bought it, I could resell it, or if I bought it, I could then progress to a better camera, a more high-end option if I found that was my niche, like if that's what I wanted to do. So that's basically the rundown of my main camera experience so far.
And you're using the G20 right now?
Yeah, the G20. I actually got it right here.
Oh, nice.
taped it up in bottomland so y'all can see it, and it's got a little sun filter on it. So it's it's a small, compact camera. Nothing crazy, nothing that you have to put up on your shoulder.
Yeah, Jake actually uses that same camera. And Ben uses kind of the series before that, I believe. He's got an M40, I think it's called.
Okay.
But it's along the same line. And then I can show you. So even he mentioned the XA50, like that's the XA50.
That's what I've been looking to upgrade to.
Yeah, this is way more than you need to start, and probably way more camera than I need. Like I said, my style is more to grow into it, and a big one for me on this was the 2 audio inputs. So I wanted to have my lapel mic and then a shotgun mic for environmental sounds and have them record at the same time. You see that a lot with some of the guys, like with turkey hunting, especially where they're set up on the ground and they get up to go chase the turkey after they've shot it, and you can still hear what they're talking about through their lapels when they're away from the camera, etc. But it's way overkill for starting, for sure. It's way overkill for where I'm at, but I plan to keep learning and grow into that camera. One key component that you hit on was the 1080 versus the 4K. That's going to trip a lot of people up. How would you describe that real quick and your recommendation on that?
So the difference in 1080 and 4K, one is going to be your storage on your computer and your SD card. 4K takes up a lot of storage. It takes a lot of power to download that 4K. And also, most people that watch your YouTube videos aren't going to watch them in 4K. They're going to watch them in 1080. One, because it takes longer for them to render, and two, it's just you don't really see that big of a difference in YouTube. You will see the difference in the DLSR and the cinematic view like we talked about earlier, but not in the 4K from what I'm seeing. But also, 4K is good for self-filmers because in the editing process, you can zoom in to those images and they will not be distorted. So say you record in 1080 in your wide frames and a deer walks through and pans through and you shoot it. Well, it's almost too wide frame that you can't see the deer, and you go in to zoom into it and it gets more grainy and it's harder to see. Well, 4K gives you that forgiveness that you can be panned out a little bit more, but then in the editing process, zoom in and actually capture that image into a 1080 format. So that's my rundown of the two.
Nailed it. And on the budget side, that's a huge jump in the budget. I would say this camera shoots in 4K. I got it for that reason. That was another big reason. When I'm in a tree stand setup where I know that, if I get a shot, it's going to be not far, period, I switch it over and just record in 1080 for those reasons that Matthew's talking about. It's really hard on the rendering when you're trying to edit. It takes up a huge file on your SD card. It takes up a huge file on my storage drive, which then means I need to get the video edited and processed and off my storage drive so that I have room to work. For many reasons, the beauty of the 4K is it buys you some forgiveness. If I am zoomed way out, I'm able to then later zoom in on editing and have a pretty clear picture, similar to if I had been zoomed in while filming. But then after I create films, I download them in 1080 anyway. I have it all switched over to 1080 to download. The file size is like 5% the size of what it would have been to try to upload onto YouTube and to save on a storage drive. And like you said, most of it is going to YouTube in 1080 anyway. The big part is the HD. The G20 has the HD, so you get that high def in it at least, even if you're not doing the 4K shooting. But jumping to 4K, it's a huge jump in price. I like it for potentially like shotgun turkey hunting, just having the wide pan of the whole field almost and being able to move from there. So that's what cameras we have. I'll just say something about what I started with. So 2 years ago, I started with a GoPro. The first year I had one GoPro, and I actually think I bought a new GoPro at that time. It was like a Hero Session or a Hero 5, and hold on. So I started with that Hero 5, and I used it. I'm trying to remember. I used it for gun hunts, I believe, because I got it after I shot my archery buck. So I used it mostly on either gun mounts or like head mounts for point of view, and that's how I made a few films that season. And then going into the next season, I decided to buy another GoPro because basically I had all the accessories to go with it. I had the familiarity with it. So then I went with 2 of the Hero 5s so that I could have one for my over-the-shoulder mount. I had a combination of things throughout the season. I had one on just a trifold tree arm thing with the really cheap ball swivel head, basically. And I held that out in front of me over my lap, and that was my main camera. And then I used the second one. Sometimes I ran it on the bow. Sometimes I ran it on like an over-the-shoulder tree arm for the hunter view. I think I picked up a Tacticam later in the year to go onto the bow. So at that point I have a Tacticam and 2 GoPros. But as I was saying before, I knew that I would repurpose these going forward. That instead of buying and replacing, whenever, like going into year 3, when I buy my true main camera, now that GoPro actually ended up going to Jake so that he would have the start to his filming collection with his over-the-shoulder, etc. But it wasn't trying to buy and sell and trade and swap for better. It was buying knowing that I'm going to use it later for a different purpose. So still investing in your inventory. This year I'm mostly using obviously the main camera. I use my over-the-shoulder GoPro that it's the Hero 5. I added a Hero 5 Session for a hunter cam now that we're saddle hunting. It's kind of a cool view to, put on your tether, and it follows you everywhere you go. And let's see, I don't really ever use the Tacticam. I didn't like it on my bow. Yeah, but for starting, what do you need to start? Again, it's on that spectrum, but I would go anywhere from probably the cheapest would be, like using a GoPro as a main cam, up to probably the best for starting, like the top of the line for actually starting, I would say is like that G20, somewhere in there, even the G10, that line of Canon cameras. Can't speak to Sony. None of us are paid by any of these people. Just this is our experience. I haven't used any Sonys. Maybe you did with your Handycam.
I can't even remember what it was, but you hit it up the nail on the head talking about the GoPros, because that's an affordable way to begin filming and to figure out if you like it. And I think it was last summer, I did a video on it talking about filming made affordable, and it ranges all the GoPros. I mean, people are, like you said, trying to jump from 3 to a 7, and you can find deals on it. I found a Hero 4 last year for $100, and it had a Sportsman's mount, that's $60 in itself, and a bunch of other mounts and batteries. So if you just get on Facebook Marketplace, there's always GoPros for sale that you can find them for cheap, and jump right into filming yourself. And then if you enjoy it, upgrade and keep those, and then use them for, I guess, our next topic would be go second angle with the GoPros, or do you want to go to camera arm?
Yeah, just with the main camera. So then people are going to wonder the accessories for a main camera. The first one's going to be the camera arm. What's your experience with camera arms?
I tried to build my camera arm first time, and I don't recommend that. There really wasn't what I wanted out on the market at the time. I wanted something that was small, compact, and had a pivot kind of joint, which is what I use now. 4th Era came out with it. It's the Talon. I had that paired with the stiff arm. Great option to go in. But before that, I used the Muddy Outfitter arm. It's a little more bulky. It's not ideal for self-filming. It can be used. I used it for 3 years and made good use of it. Just a little heavier. It's easier if you're going to film somebody with it. You get a more stable image. But yeah, right now I'm using the Fourth Arrow Talon. It has been wonderful.
So you guys can take this as confirmation of what we think is good or a lack of diversity, but we use a lot of the same gear. And it's totally unintentional. I would take it as confirmation of what's good gear, actually. But like I said, I use just a plain old simple rectangular tube screw-in tree arm to start. I think you can, most of them look like bow hangers, but they make some that are camera mounts. By like Realtree or something, and I just used that. It was a triple arm that I just wrapped around me as I was sitting in a stand with the harness on, and had the GoPro just right out in front of me. And then, go ahead.
Well, I was about to say, I had the same kind of setup: the screw-in limb hanger, and then the old Muddy had a camera mount, kind of like that. It wasn't a fluid head, but it was. You had to tighten it for it to stop, and that was a pain in the rear. Yep. Fluid heads are a game changer. So, but anyways, my bad.
Well, that's exactly what I had. So then I used that again with the knowledge that, okay, when I get a better camera and a better camera arm, this whole setup now is going to move up and over my shoulder, and it's going to give me the ability to really reach out from the tree and set my angle with the triple arm with the GoPro to get my over the shoulder hunter angle. So the investment here didn't go to waste. It just was going to go there, and then I'll reinvest back into front of me again. And then I went Fourth Arrow as well. I looked around at the different options out there, and I ended up going Fourth Arrow. We're blessed now at Middle American Outdoors, and full disclosure, we work with Fourth Arrow. So this year, all the guys are running Fourth Arrow. Jake and Ben are running the 2.0 system, the heavier, bulkier shoulder and stiff arm, which is a beast, though. That thing does not move, period. You can put a 10-pound weight out there, and you're not going to have any movement when you're moving your camera, which is really great for panning around, etc. But it's heavier, and as I transitioned to saddle hunting, it was really bulky. So I also went to the 3.0 system, which is the Talon. It's so much lighter and compact, and really it's basically just as stable if you get it set right. Sweet option, lighter, but there's plenty out there. Just look around. I mean, I know there's Muddy, there's Fourth Arrow, there's like Out on the Limb, a bunch of different companies that make, it's hard to get your hands on them. That's the hard part. So just do your internet research best you can, or ask questions before you make that investment. So other things with the main camera, if you're going to be ground hunting, you're looking at a tripod. And then the last piece of the I guess I would think of two more big pieces to consider that you don't necessarily need right away. Fluid head is one. I don't think you need like a Manfrotto or this crazy expensive $200 fluid heads. You can get a normal video head for like $50 or $60 just to have some range of motion of your camera. But you're going to want that so that your arm's not always going to be able to reach what you're looking for. You need to be able to actually pivot the camera around like a globe. And then the last one would be like a Link remote of some sort. They make a huge difference if your camera will accept it. It's LANC remote, and like I'm sure you do, the VariZoom works for the Canons. And it's just great to be able to hold the handle of your camera and control your zoom and even your focus if you need to, without a ton of extra movement, especially for bow hunting. But those are not necessary to start. It's things that are going to make it easier, and you're looking at, if you want to enjoy it and make great quality videos, then the more money you put into it, the more likely the more money and time you put into learning, the more likely you're to make quality videos, and the higher quality of videos you make, the more likely you're to enjoy it. It's just that spectrum of knowing what you're getting into. I guess the next category we just talked about was other angles. We've kind of touched on it some. As far as other angles, we had down basically your bow or shooter angle, your hunter view, and then your ground angle. Keep in mind that we're all self-filming. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about team filming or anything. talking about setups and angles for self-filming. So what are some of the angles that you consistently run, Matthew, and how do you run those?
So I have gone through every camera angle that you could possibly think of or see through YouTube consuming content. My main second angle is I try to get over the shoulder or like a third person view of myself. So basically, I'm just going to run two angles to make it easier for me because I am a self filmer. I have found myself before having so many cameras around me. I've had 3 or 4 GoPros around me. Well, when a deer's walking in front of me and I go to try to turn on all those cameras, that's twice as much movement that I have to make now. GoPro and people have the buttons you can press. I just never synced all my cameras up to it. But no, the main second angle that I use is a third person view with my GoPro, either over my shoulder or say I'm saddle hunting. I'm gonna put it either on my tethered or clip it to the side of the tree. That's really the two angles I try to get for all my videos, just to kind of break up that editing to give you a different view as the viewer and kind of make the video a little more entertaining.
Right on. And that last part kind of trails into another topic we're going to cover down the road on an episode. We're going to cover more of just the tips and tricks for actually producing the film and the content. I agree. And you see when you watch my videos, I usually have the 2 or 3 different angles on me when I'm talking, just so I can kick back and forth and change the picture you're seeing. It's sometimes incredibly difficult to sync up the video and the audio.
That's rough.
But and sometimes it's not actually synced. We just try to pass it off as such. But it does break up the monologue some. In what we're doing at Mill American Outdoors, we feel like the monologues are necessary because we're trying to do the education and talk through what we're thinking and doing component. So we just can't get away from doing some monologues. So just trying to find ways to break it up and make it not so monotonous. And that's one way. I'm right with them. I got the main angle always, unless it's pouring rain. Ice rain. And then I've always tried to have like a GoPro mounted over the shoulder. I've got the GoPro on the tether that's right in my face, and would follow me around the tree. And I've been doing a lot recently with trail cameras on the ground. I've got one trail camera that I keep in my bag. It's a Browning, and I keep it on video mode, and whatever spot I'm in, wherever I think the most likely trails are, I just kind of sneak out and screw it into the tree real quick and flip it on. I catch some clips of me going up in the tree or down out of the tree, and you never know, someday I might catch something crazy on it.
When I watched one of your videos and saw you setting up, I was like, I've never thought of that before. But that's pretty. You see videos or you see pictures of people with a deer standing over about to get shot, and they're standing there, in their stand. That's kind of the same thing you're doing, but you're mobile enough that you take it with you wherever you go. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, you watch the Hunting Public, so you've seen Ted Miller in Iowa. I kind of got it from him because he puts out those horizontal rubs, and he sets up his cameras on them throughout the year. And then whenever he puts his tree stands in, it seems like he puts them in frame on that existing trail camera. And so I'm always trying to get it far enough back that hopefully I'll catch myself up in the tree as the deer is getting shot or something. You never know. I mean,
that's those shots of a lifetime that make videos. You dream of that moment.
Yeah. And you never get it if the camera's not out there. So
exactly.
But so I have this is my first hunting video this year back on Labor Day. It's just called Covered in Deer. And it was the first time I ran that angle, and I was legitimately covered in deer that night. And it was so crazy and cool to have them on 4 different angles. Basically the same deer, I'm up in the tree stand filming this deer down below me, and she's standing right in front of the trail camera. And to be able to cut back and forth and show those views, definitely. But just cool things to consider. I do think, at the bare minimum, you need to have your main camera, and you need an action cam, whether that's your over the shoulder, the hunter catching you shooting, or you put it on your bow. That way you know that It's going to be facing toward your game. That can even be your main camera if you need it to be or want it to be. Some caution with that is, with good bow form, your bow is going to drop out of the picture, and depending on how far the shot was, like Matthew took one at 40 this year, right? And if you were doing that, by the time that made impact, your bow would have fallen out of range. We had David Babiak on here earlier in the year from his bear hunt, and it was the same situation. He had the Tacticam on, and he shot at the bear, and by the time it made impact, the Tacticam was out of range, so they didn't get any information from it. Because he had good form and his bow fell through like it should. So that's a caution with it. A lot of people wear, or I've seen in the past, people wear like the Tacticam on the side of their head. Just keeping in mind you want to practice it so that your angle is matching. If it's right up against your head and you got your bow drawn back, you're not going to be facing the deer at all. You need to have it on your head from practice so that it's facing downrange and you'll have a chance at actually getting the deer. Some people wear the GoPro on their chest. Same situation. If you put it on your chest and you draw your bow back, you're perpendicular to where that deer is actually at. But those are options. Let's see. Next category is funny because this is how we actually met. But your pack. That's a huge one. It's a huge investment. It's something to figure out. But what have you used for packs, especially for camera gear and being a mobile hunter?
So I found the perfect pack for me, but the material is awful. It's not made to withstand sticks and a platform and everything. But no, I've kind of gone around in a big circle. Before I really dove into filming, I always wore a fanny pack because I had a Badlands fanny pack. It was small, compact, and I actually could put a main camera and a GoPro, strap a camera arm to the bottom, and then just walk in with my big muddy outfitter arm, beating bushes and whatnot. But I moved from that to an Alps pack. That was okay. And this was all while I was still hunting out of a tree stand, a climber, before I moved into more of the hang and hunt system. So when I moved to the hang and hunt system, I tried to use the Alps pack. It wasn't great for my sticks. Looked around, and then I bought the Camera Day pack that you ended up buying from me. I hunted with it the first weekend in Georgia, and I said, this thing is too big for me. So I ended up selling that. It was great. It had all the compartments that you needed, was just too big for what I wanted. And so I actually ended up going and I found a backpack made by Drake Waterfowl. It's their Deer Hunter series. And it's got the clips on the side for my sticks. The back compartment closes up for my Predator platform. And then I can fit my small camera base, my arm, my main camera, and then my GoPro or two GoPros that I put in there. Then I may throw a pair of binoculars or a grunt call in there. So I try to keep it as simple as possible because I know I am carrying in a bunch of stuff already. I mean, I'll have people pick up my pack and they're like, how do you walk in the woods with that? They say you hunt light when you saddle hunt, but not when you saddle hunt and sell film. You're actually hunting heavy compared to most people. But yeah, that's the pack that I'm using right now. I really want to try out the Everly Stock 2. I've heard it's a great pack, but just haven't made that investment yet.
I am obviously experienced with the same packs. We used, let's see, last year I wasn't using like camera specific packs because all I had was the GoPros. I was using the Badlands 2200 with the frame pack because I carry too much gear, man. That's a big problem of mine is just, I'm like prepared for like a week-long stay if I need to, I think sometimes.
It'll come in handy at some point.
Yeah, like too much survival, what if, and not like I'm 400 yards from my trucks most of the time.
Dude, I forget a knife most of the times I go hunting.
Yeah, I just so overkill. I probably have 4 of them.
Yeah.
Just in case I lose 3 somehow.
Right.
But then just way overkill. I still have the 2200 because I love it, and I'll keep it for like packing out someday or whatever. I just like the frame pack to get the weight better distributed and basically off of my shoulders directly. Last year I was hunting out of an X-Stand backcountry, which is kind of the hang and hunt 20-pound option with sticks and a platform. And I mean, it got me to be more mobile, but it was very cumbersome, especially within a pack and everything else. And I used the Badlands Monster Pack at one time to keep it all around your waist. You know, I tried wearing a turkey vest and stuffing stuff in the pockets as well, just all kinds of different things. And then going into this year, I know that I need to protect this very expensive main camera, and my camera load's a lot bigger with all the additional batteries, etc. And so I started out with that Alps Pathfinder, which I did a gear review and a gear dump on, so you can go see just how OCD and overpacked I am when I dumped that bag out. But it was a great pack. I love that it could be a lumbar pack and then had basically like the convertible backpack feature to it, which is just a huge bag. It could hold a lot of stuff. It had a very protected area for the main camera and the lumbar pack. But I ended up buying Matthew's Badland Camera Day pack, or Camera Pro, and it was, like he said, large. And if you're like me, then that means that you just keep packing stuff, man. If there's room for it, I'm putting it in there, and I'm like carrying like a 60-pound pack into the trees. And that's, you know, with like 5 pounds of sticks and a 3-pound platform. And I've got 50 pounds of gear in a pack to go sit in the tree for 3 hours.
Yep.
It's just stupid. It was overkill. And so I kept looking for other options, and I'm currently using the Sitka tool bucket, which I really like, because then it's you hang it and you open it, and just like a tool bucket, it's got all the sleeves in there, and so everything's tucked away nicely. I'm very OCD about that kind of stuff, especially in the tree, and so everything's where it's supposed to be every time. It's easily accessible. I just keep it right beside me when I'm in the saddle. I don't have to unpack a ton of stuff because it's all reachable. It's not piled on top of each other. And I like that pack. It could use some help as far as where to clip on sticks and strap on sticks and some other things like this. I can't think of the name of the company right now, but there's a company out there. I'll try to post the link or share it on our Facebook page sometime. And you can actually send them your pack, and then they'll do like a discussion with you on what kind of stuff you want to put on it, and they'll sew on your molly and your loops and your attachments and everything onto the pack that you currently own. So they'll basically build you your dream pack out of what you have. And I've looked at that as far as if I had them sew on, for holding the sticks or whatever, more compression straps. If you're like me, you love compression straps. Like, the more compression straps, the better, because if it doesn't fit in the pack, I can put it on the pack.
Open up, cinch it down, and go.
Just like my packs end up like 6 feet wide, just sticking out the back of me. But yeah, there's a ton of gear. I mean, especially when you start getting into the big main cameras and the secondary cameras and the different arms and the backup batteries and the backup everything. I'm just looking at some comments here. It's kind of weird. So Ben's hosting a watch party, actually, so I'm not able to pull. I don't see his comments live, so I'm trying to thumb through them. Let's see. How about SD cards? If people don't know about SD cards, what's some tips to look for on the SD cards they're getting for their cameras?
I keep it pretty simple. You can spend a fortune on SD cards if you want to. But with my camera that I have right now, it has a 32 gigabyte hard drive, and then I'm running these SanDisk 64 gigabyte cards right there. They're pretty affordable. So I've got two 64 gigabytes, and they work really good. Now for my GoPro, I run a 258 or 56 gigabyte card in it, which that allows me like 13 hours or 16 hours of recording time, depending on what I record in. And that goes back to our 4K to 1080. You know, if I stay in 1080, I get 16 hours. If I go to 4K, I may get 2 hours. You know, it just depends. So SD cards, I mean, don't slack off on the overall storage, but also kind of try to get you a decent card, because I have seen cards go corrupt. Don't use your game camera cards for your video camera cards, because you will get them confused and you will delete your footage. It's happened to me before. So just be aware of that. Invest in some cards. Invest in organizing your cards too. That's a big deal for me, is being able to stay organized in that.
And
thumb through all these files to then find that it may or may not be there. I just go ahead and make its own section. So like the one of my videos was the kudzu buck. So that was one day of footage. You know, I get all that footage, I dump it into one folder called the kudzu buck edit or something like that, and then I delete it off my other cards. So I have everything on that external hard drive, and then that makes the editing process that much easier.
so I think we lost sound for a second when I asked the question. I just asked him if he stores his cards and just keeps getting more cards, or if he moves his footage over, and he just talked about moving the footage over. But SD card wise, look at your camera that you buy and what they recommend as far as the class of the card and etc., and just follow the recommendations. Like you said, like Matthew said, don't try to go cheap on it and skimp out, because you'll be kicking yourself when you make a mistake there. One thing I look at is, like, so in my mind, like, I have a few 128 gigabyte micro SD cards for like GoPros and different things, and they're about 7 or 8 hours of footage probably. And in my mind, I would buy 2 of those instead of one 256, because maybe I'll end up with a second GoPro at some point and I'll have 2 cards already. And I haven't done any like long hunts so far, so I know that like basically after every hunt I'm gonna dump my cards. I would name your cards if you can. If you have the ability to erase and format your cards, I would name them, especially your external drive. Like, the worst thing that's happened at Middle American Outdoors is right before the season, or right in the beginning of the season, I erased my hard drive, my external hard drive for Middle American Outdoors, and it's gone. Like, Ben and I didn't lose anything hugely critical. Jamie up in Canada asked last week about the Junk for Jamie unboxing, and that was actually on there, so I lost the footage from unboxing that. Ben and I and his sons had just done a 3D tournament in Iowa, and we were going to do a big promotion for that group and had an interview with them and all that stuff, and I erased that. It just was in too big a hurry, and I ended up double clicking to erase the external drive instead of the SD card, which, yeah, I should have just had them named and do not erase on there or something.
Yeah.
I
usually name mine the type of camera it's in. Like, my G20 cards are all named G20, and then my DLSR card is named DLSR. So
I do about the same, and then what format they're supposed to be, whether it's XFAT or MS-DOS or FAT or whatever. Whatever worked the best before. That way I make sure I'm reformatting that way. Like, my Canon won't take MS-DOS cards, so you have to have XFAT format on them, otherwise it rejects them, and you'd hate to get out there and have reformatted the cards inappropriately and now you can't record. But so that's the topic on the SD cards. I did see a couple other questions. Let's see. Funny question from Ben, just because you watched the video today, but he says, how do you remember to push the record button?
Don't be afraid to push record. We talked about this.
Start that thing early, man.
Yeah, you see the deer, just press it.
I can cut that out. However many hours you had beforehand of it just recording. I think, I've got a video coming out way down the road here last weekend, or 2 weekends ago maybe. I rifle hunted with my 3-year-old daughter in a tower, and I knew that there'd probably be something good that happened at some point, and so I put the session up in the corner of the tower, and I just put it on an external battery, which is another topic of discussion in battery power. So you can buy like little Anchor external batteries, and I love having those things. They take cold weather better, all those things. So you can hook one of those up to your secondary angles and run it off of that, and I just let it go and just record the entire 2 hours we were in the blind, and then I'll go back through that file and pick out the chunks of the funny stuff that happened or whatever. But that way I didn't miss it. And you could do basically the same. I used to do it last year when we were entering prime time. I would just turn all the secondary cameras on and leave them on. That way I didn't have to worry about getting busted trying to reach for them or anything like that too.
One less thing to do.
Go ahead.
Just one less thing that you have to think about doing.
Yeah. And I've been telling Jake and Ben too, a big part of it is just getting out and doing it, a lot earlier in the year. So you get these things like, you get out earlier than you maybe normally would have, like, because you're probably not going to kill a big buck in September or something, but you're out there doing this process and you're going through the filming and the steps and all these things, so that it's one less thing to have to remember to do when it's the rut kind of thing. Let's see, he also says, as far as like mounted camera on like a weapon mount, what have you used, or what would you recommend? Have you ever put any on your bow or anything?
Yeah, so I've actually done the mount on my bow. I've shot a deer with a mount on my bow, and I've had the same result you said. The shot gets there, by the time it gets there, your bow's moved and out of the way. But also used it on my shotgun for turkey hunts. That's a real cool view, duck hunts, dove hunts, all that. But the mount that I use that goes with that for the GoPro is the Sportsman's mount. I think I have 2 of them that I run, but that's a very good tool. It's just like a C-clamp. And then I've also got, I actually have it right here on my GoPro. This is just the gooseneck with the clamp. That is a great tool to have. I mean, I wouldn't say get this for your bow or for your gun. Now, I have seen the hunting public in their turkey videos, they will clip this to the butt, the stock of their gun, and then have this coming around to where you have a great down-the-barrel view. But this is what I use to clamp on the tree and like tree limbs around me too, ground hunting, tree hunting. But back to your question on for a bow or a gun, I would look at the Sportsman's mount that GoPro makes. That is a great tool to have.
I definitely agree. And they make them similar for Tacticam. Again, you'll see in that rifle footage, I had a Tacticam on the rifle just to clamp onto the barrel with the Tacticam, and it actually gave some really good footage of the rifle shot. And I have also run the Tacticam stabilizer in the bow. Just depends on how you feel about your bow. I've run it in the stabilizer mount. I've run it on the clamp onto the stabilizer with an actual stabilizer on there. And I didn't like how the bow felt in my hand, and that's way more important to me than the action shot. And obviously I have plenty of other cameras. Let's see, what else have I run? I've done a lot of the on the head stuff early. I also have that gooseneck thing that you showed. And that thing is sweet for a lot of different usages, whether you're in a ground blind or, that's what I was using in that tower 2 weekends ago, is put that up in the top of the tower and use that gooseneck and put the camera any angle you want. I've seen a lot of people use those on ground hunting, even on quote-unquote spot and stock, but basically still hunting on the ground. You can cut yourself into a pine or something, a cedar, and have that camera right there to hook up. I hunted from the ground in a video that is It either just came out last week or it's coming out Friday. And I hunted on the ground in the morning, and I used that. I was in like a thorn bush, basically hiding behind the thorn bush tree, and I used that as my hunter angle because it's just very adaptable, and it's light, it's easy to pack. Let's see, some other, I guess, do you have any other gear that you use, topics you want to cover that people maybe ask you that weren't on the list?
I mean, a lot of times, people are just like, "Hey, what camera are you using? Why are you using that?" Another thing that you mentioned it with your camera was your mics and how your externals go and whatnot. I actually for this camera, it's got a little shoe-in area that you can plug in, and then everything goes in that. But I started running with the bigger the Video Mic Pro. The Rode Video Mic Pro, and it was just huge. I mean, it's as big as this camera right here. It was an overkill for me. So I've actually moved to what I was using for my GoPro, which this is just the mini. It gets the sound just as good, and even not using a mic, these cameras are so good with their audio and how far they've come. That just makes it a little more crisp. You get a little bit more crack when that arrow hits the deer, or a little more bang when that bullet, makes contact with your animal, and just makes the video, a little bit more better. I wouldn't say it's a make or break thing, but many a times I'll leave them at home on accident and just have my camera audio, and that doesn't affect anything. But yeah, so, and also, that's external mics, the wireless mics. Like you were saying, to hold that talk when you leave the camera, it's still picking up your audio. That's a big deal. I think that's really cool, and how guys can utilize that and make it. Now, I used to do it a lot when I was really concerned about that, but now I've gotten tired of carrying that stuff with me, so I just take this smaller mic. And y'all may can see that the reoccurring statement for me is with my self-filming stuff, I started with a bunch of stuff, and I've slowly gone down to just the necessary stuff you need. I run a very zoom remote. I have a camera arm. I have a small mic. I have one GoPro. I have my main camera. So you don't necessarily have to have all the bells and whistles, which all the bells and whistles are great. They're fun to play with, but you can keep it as simple. And I guess for a guy who's starting, who's not used to carrying all this stuff, that's a great way to jump into it and start, simple. And if you want more, get more, lights. That's a whole nother topic. Like we've said, we could go into batteries, lights, camera action, whatnot,
Yeah, I am on board with I was recently running the video mic, the Rode Video Mic as well, shotgun style. And one thing you'll find when you run camera, like stuff like that, you guys have heard it in my videos if you watched them, is sometimes those mics can get too hot, and it totally ruins the footage, basically. And I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, we use it because we're trying to do something here and produce stuff, but it gives some feedback, and it's a total pain in the neck to try to figure out. I mean, it took me hours when it first happened to figure out why it was running hot and giving that feedback. And then it started doing it again. So I basically just got rid of it last week and went without. I probably won't be running. I might do like Matthew just said. I have that little Rode furball thing there that I ran on a GoPro in the past, and maybe I'll just throw that on the camera now for that external mic. The external mic is great, especially those omnidirectional ones, because they can pick up on those leaves crunching behind you, or that exciting stuff for the tree stand hunter, those noises that make it so exciting. But it's a huge expense. Those Video Mic Pros are like $300 probably, and the other thing you mentioned was the Lapel Mic. I think that really would cover me. It was more when I was doing the GoPros is when I got it, because the GoPros had terrible audio, and especially if you're holding them or touching them on any means, it would pick up on like every scratch and hiss and metallic noise, and it just sounded awful. And so I started running those started running the wireless. But then you lost out on a lot of the external environmental noise, and you're just getting a clean voice. I kept using it on the main cam for a more clean voice, but yeah, a lot of that stuff is the interviews, and as you guys have seen, I've been doing a lot more interviews with my cell phone because it picks up on audio extremely well. It's a lot easier real quick. We're starting to try to do those check-ins on the page when we get to a set, and we use those check-ins as part of our intro in our videos now, and they pick up on audio really well. When I'm holding my cell phone, I'm able to move around the tree and show you different things that are going on without having to move a lot of things and move cameras around to show you, or go back and film it later as B-roll. So maybe the video or the lapel mic isn't something I actually need, and I need to reevaluate that next year. Those suckers are expensive. That's why you don't want to go take a bite of that apple if you don't absolutely need to. When I was GoPro filming, I felt like I absolutely needed to, because I couldn't produce content that I didn't feel disgusted about putting out, because you couldn't hear me over the sound, the metallic sounds of the GoPro was picking up and everything else.
I'm having issues with that with my 5s. It's rough.
Yeah. When you were on before, this is a good topic. I mean, we can touch on briefly. So when we come to budget, the big part of the budget is knowing where those dollars are going to be best spent. If you're going to spend those extra dollars, is it worth it to go from 1080 to 4K? Probably not. Is it worth it to go from a GoPro 5 to a GoPro 7 or 8 or 9? Absolutely, because their audio is phenomenal.
Bright and dark, yeah.
And they start shooting in 4K and all these other crazy things that is just crazy for a little GoPro. But just the audio itself is a tremendous difference and worth the money. Another one that we kind of touched on our last episode was the Tacticam. A lot of people ask about Tacticams. Is the Solo good enough, or should I get a 4 or 5? If you're going to have a little bit of extra money to budget into, the 4 or the 5 is going to be a tremendous improvement over the Solo. As far as being able to zoom, do you run Tacticams or use them at all?
I've never had a Tacticam, no. I've just stayed with GoPro. I'm not sponsored by GoPro or anything. I like how they look. Actually, at one of our guys, he uses Tacticam, and
okay.
He's had good results out of it. But I don't know which one it was. The footage was a little grainy. It may have been one of the older model ones, but I mean, some of the stuff you see on TV and other people's channel, they look right on to me.
Yeah. So from my knowledge, I've never had a Solo, but I'm pretty sure a Solo is just on or off, essentially. 4.0s and 5.0s, you're going into having zoom mode, stabilizer, like slow motion mode, which are really great, especially like on a bow shot or something. It slows it down and stabilizes the image, so you don't get all that vibration coming through the stabilizer. I think the difference between the 4 and the 5 is just the amount of zoom, actually, but don't quote me on it. I don't think there's a huge difference between a 4 and a 5, but Solo to a 4 or a 5 is a tremendous difference, and probably worth that little bit of extra, because you'd hate to shoot some footage and then go home and see how grainy it is, and you can't even tell what happened, and it's frustrating to you, and now you're ticked off that you spent all this money in it, especially if you're only using it for last time we spoke, we talked about why you get into self-filming, and if you're self-filming for that aspect of information on the shot, basically, and you put a Solo on your bow and then you realize you can't even see what's going on the deer that you shot at 25 yards because it's so grainy, you can't get any information on impact, and now that whole reason that you bought that wasn't even worth it. Like, it would be super frustrating. So to know that, well, if you spent a little bit of extra money and got a 4 or 5 and had good zoom or stabilization, and now you can see that you hit high and back, or that whatever happened that you bought that camera for, it makes it much more worth staying in what you're doing, basically. Let's see. Anything else you got that was on your mind for tonight with gear related?
I think that's a good just base layer of what self-filming is, what, it kind of takes. It's more you, the person, than the camera gear necessarily. That's all I would really have to say. And, like we can dive into it deeper and deeper into more episodes. And, I mean, we could talk about this all night. We could run circles around everything that we've said and continue to say, but I think that's a good, starting point for people. We could, show them link. I think that would be a good thing to kind of write down what me and you have or what you have, and put it in the description or something so people can go and look at what there is and kind of get a price range, just to know what they're getting into.
Yeah, we can do that too. And then on my videos, when I'm the hunter, you'll see in the comments I have a list of my main gear, and Amazon affiliate links, basically, so you can just see what the pricing is on that kind of stuff. But
that's smart. I've been meaning to do that in mine, but I just can't take the time to list everything.
I think you'll see it on a lot of self-filmers or on a lot of YouTube content producers. You can go in there and they'll have their gear links. Ask us questions, shoot us questions, off the record on our channels, whatever. Go check out Matthew's video from last summer on hunting on a budget, self-filming on a budget. Let us know as the two groups if there's anything you'd like to see us put together as videos. And for the guys that are on there, they're going to be at the expo. Come watch the seminar. We're going to be trying to put this down to an hour-long format of just touching on some topics, essentially. But yeah, well, thanks for joining us, man. We'll get you on here again in a few weeks, and we'll go into next time the geeky side, the computer side, different storage devices and editing software and everything like that. My closing thing I'll say, we didn't really go too much into it. Cell phones. If you have a good smartphone, man, start with that. Just test the waters, see how you like it. Just shooting clips with that. Like Matthew said, you can find lenses. Last year I did a lot of zoom filming with the phone scope in my phone and a Vortex monocular. And I just had that hanging in the tree all the time. And anytime I wanted to pick up some deer footage from a distance, I would just turn on the cell phone and try to shoot that. You lose out on stabilization and those kind of things, which I guess the main reason I did want to say this. So a big reason to jump from like a GoPro or a cell phone as your main camera to a big, good main camera, a consumer model or prosumer model or whatever, is the deer footage and the wild game footage and the zoom. So if you watched my films last year to this year, it went from me trying to film a deer from across the river through a monocular, pretty grainy and unstable, just to show some deer action that I'm seeing in person that I'm not getting on film, to now I was able to zoom in on a deer that was eating on cut beans and like look at his jaw basically. And just to bring that content to the video, especially if your reason for self-filming is to document the outdoors, then that's going to be a huge difference for you to get an actual camera with good zoom. And look, Matthew touched on going into knowing what optical zoom your camera has and what your goal would be as far as, you don't need a ton of optical zoom for bow hunting unless you're just trying to film deer in the distance for B-roll and capture that image. But rifle or gun hunting, if you want to try to get that kill shot in the distance, you need a lot of optical zoom, and that costs more. But anyway, we'll wrap it down because like Matthew said, we'll just keep going. Thanks for coming on, man. We'll get you back on here in a few weeks. And those guys that are listening and are watching now and listening later, thank you. And we'll keep this coming. Thanks, guys.